So when winter comes, could you take some of your more tender plants indoors and enjoy them as houseplants? And conversely, when summer comes, could you take some of your houseplants outside and enjoy them on your terrace or in your garden? Well, you can, but only with certain plants. And because when we're going into winter, Australia's going into summer, this is a collaborative video with the lovely Horti-Culturalists YouTube channel with Stephen Ryan and Matthew Lucas. It's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I'm here at a wonderful plant shop, indoor plant shop called Forest in South London. And there are two forests, and they have wonderful indoor plants. They have workshops about indoor plants. And Maddie and Alice Bailey, who are here, have written a book called The Green Indoors. And the basic premise of this is if you understand what your plants would have needed in the wild to thrive or how they would grow in a garden, then you can understand much more about how to keep them, where to place them inside and how to look after them inside. Right plant, right place is absolutely at the core of gardening outside. For example, if you put your plant in the place where it'll get the right amount of sunlight for it, it'll just look so much happier, it'll thrive so much better. But it wasn't until I'd read The Green Indoors that I realised that the same thing applies indoors. After all, if a plant needs quite filtered light and you stick it on a sunny windowsill, well, it's going to look pretty scorched and miserable. So it makes a lot of sense. And so we're going to give you the advice that you need to know if you're going to treat these plants as indoor plants, and the horticulturalists, Stephen and Matthew, are going to give us the advice we need if you're going to treat them as outdoor plants. And there are two videos, so some of the plants will be on one video and some on another. I'll put links in the description below to the Horticulturalists channel, to Forest and to the Green Indoors and to any other resources we mention. And if you're new here, the Middlesized Garden uploads weekly with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. So if you'd like to see the videos when you open up YouTube, then tap the subscribe button. And what do we need to know if you are thinking of, for instance, taking a plant inside and making it a house plant? That really isn't always going to work, is it? So what should people be looking out for?
Absolutely not. You're quite right. So things that I would really be looking out for is, does the space you want to put your plant in have enough ventilation? First of all, because a lot of outdoor plants can't deal with the fact that our homes are quite cooped up, or they may have dry air, radiators, things like that. Is it well ventilated enough? Is there enough access to outside air? And then also another thing to really look at is there enough light? So if there isn't enough light and you can't really recreate the outside inside, then it's not going to work. And then also specific types of plants won't work as well. So dahlias and things like that won't work as well indoors as they would outdoors because of the light, ventilation and things like that.
And of course they go dormant in the winter, and then that's the other issue as well. So now let's talk to Alice about the specific indoor-outdoor plants. Right, so Alice, Stephen and Matthew and I decided on a short list of plants that we reckoned you could have indoors as house plants and take outside and enjoy, at least for some time, depending on your climate, outdoors. And the first one we picked was Alocasia. So what's your advice on Alocasia?
So Alocasia, like a spot with quite bright light, no direct sunlight, but quite a bright spot. Ideally, they'd want to be a bit sheltered, as in the rainforest, they have the canopy of trees above them. They love a lot of humidity, so a bright bathroom would be ideal, or a kitchen environment where it gets lots of humidity from cooking.
So, Matthew and Stephen, what do you think about Alocasia growing outside? What is your advice there?
Stephen, here we are in your Alocasia grove, indoors, outdoors. We're outdoors. What are your thoughts?
All right, indoors, yes, but it would need reasonably high light levels and certainly away from heaters and things like that.
High light?
Yeah, high light inside for Alocasias.
Ah, okay. I've got mine in a low light place, so I will move it.
Yes, I think I would. Out in the garden, I have to protect them from frosts a wee bit, so we actually have it in a fairly shady spot near my fish pond.
Yeah.
They do get nipped in the winter, and I have to take the old leaves off in the spring.
Yeah.
And these are just starting to refurbish now, which will look fabulous in about a month.
Yes, and you also got quite a hefty trunk as well.
Well, they've been in the ground for quite a long time, and they can develop quite a trunkiness underneath them, but you can always cut them off if you want to, and they will reshoot from the bottom of the crown.
Excellent. On to the next.
Well, of course, there is a plant that we all loved to hate in the past and which became so unfashionable and almost a joke, but of course we're now falling in love with it again, and that's the Aspidistra. So what's your recommendation on that as an indoor plant?
the Aspidistra, the cast iron plant. Yeah. They are literally cast iron in their care, so very low maintenance. They can go in a very shaded spot. They don't mind a bit of a draft, any unfavourable conditions, and they'll tolerate them. They don't really want to go below 6 degrees, but because 6 degrees is quite a moderate temperature, they can actually be outside for quite a long time.
Well, over to Matthew and Stephen for their advice on this plant.
Okay, Alexandra, Aspidistra, Stephen.
Yes.
What are your thoughts indoors, outdoors in Australia?
In Australia, definitely a good indoor plant. I remember it in the old barber shop in the Jardinier when I was a kid.
Yes.
And certainly out in the garden all year round if you wish to, as long as you're not in a heavily frosty area. Shade and dryness are the two things that Aspidistra need when they're outdoors.
Yes.
Inside they'll cope with low light levels and they're not particularly fussy about aspects and things, so it's lives up to its name. It's a cast iron plant.
There you go. And this is a sort of a more fancier modern variety which is called Milky Way.
Yes, and it has these gorgeous little spots all over the leaves.
There we go. On to the next.
I've always thought Aeoniums could probably be indoor and outdoor plants quite easily. I actually had one on my terrace the whole of the summer and I've just brought it in. In fact, I put it in the bathroom, so I'm not sure if I put it in the right place. So what's your recommendation on Aeoniums as an indoor plant?
They don't tend to love humidity. As a desert plant, they prefer warm, dry air, but they are happy as long as they're in a very bright spot and they can tolerate a drop in temperature. So anywhere down to about 5 degrees is absolutely fine for an Aeonium.
And do they need any particular special care as a house plant, do you think?
So they're very happy with minimal amounts of water. As long as they're in very bright sunlight, they tend to be perfectly happy indoors.
Aeonium.
I'd say Aeonium.
Aeonium. Look at yours. They are so green and juicy. Goodness.
Yes, and these are definitely a good outdoor plant in our sort of climate.
Clearly.
They're Canary Island flora, so they're actually Mediterranean type climate plants.
Yep.
So they do really well in our hot, dry summers, and they can make really good pot plants indoors, albeit with lots of light. They need to be right out in as light a spot as possible.
Yeah, or a greenhouse.
And they don't mind being root bound. I mean, they're a really, really amenable plant, and there's a whole range of forms and colours in them.
Yeah.
Some of the burgundy leafed ones actually need more light than the green leaf ones if they're going to keep their colour.
Yeah, and you've got one over there, haven't you?
Yes, I've got one called Velour, which is actually in too much shade, so it's not as brown as it should be, but it has got some of that lovely browny colour in the rosettes.
Excellent. Okay. On to the next.
I always think of Fatsia as an outdoor plant, but actually I do see it recommended sometimes as an indoor plant. So what are your recommendations there?
So Fatsia can be taken indoors and kept as a houseplant, as long as they're not kept anywhere too close to a heat source. They tend to be fine. They don't want bright sunlight, but a bright spot with no direct light is ideal, and they are quite shade tolerant as well.
Matthew and Stephen, what's your advice on that?
Okay, Stephen, Fatsia japonica, indoors, outdoors, what do you think?
Ideal for both. It's one of those great plants.
Yep.
It's very hard to kill, so it's a great indoor plant. I can remember it even way back in the 1960s in anodised pots.
Way back in the 1960s?
Yes, way back then. And it's a great outdoor plant as well because it's fairly cold tolerant, so it can be grown outdoors well in Britain and also in parts of the USA. So it's cold tolerant, it's heat tolerant, it is also drought tolerant, so it doesn't need a lot of water once it's established in the garden. So it's a fairly foolproof indoor, outdoor pot plant or garden plant.
And indoors, low light?
Yeah, it's better in a low light situation in either place. So outdoors it will burn if it's in direct sun, as you may have found out.
I did. I've got 2 pots of them that are in transit as we move, and they were in direct afternoon sun and they did not. They pinged back, but it took a whole year for them to recover.
And of course evergreen plants, when they get burnt, it does take a long time for them to pop back.
And you see the leaves as a constant reminder for your bad behaviour.
Yes, or your bad plant husbandry might be the way to put it.
This brings to mind.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the next.
Yep.
So what about Hoyas, which is very much considered in the UK a house plant? So what's your advice on that?
So it depends on the type of Hoya, but a lot of them have very waxy leaves, which means they're tolerant to unfavourable conditions like a draft, like a little bit of cold, or being close to a heat source. They don't tend to kind of crisp in the same way other tropical houseplants would. They can take quite bright light, not full hot midday sun, but bright light is fine for them, and very minimal watering.
Hoyas, Stephen. Hoyas seem to be incredibly fashionable and popular at the moment as indoor plants.
They're having their moment in the sun.
Again.
Again, yes. And so
but not in the sun.
But not in the sun, yes. Hoyas like lowish light levels.
Yeah.
They can be grown outdoors in Melbourne. They're borderline hardy up here as long as we keep them on a veranda or somewhere where there's no real frost gets in, they can be grown.
Yeah.
And they again need to be carefully watered because Hoyas are very easy to overwater. So you want to make sure they're well and truly dried out before you water them again, and also make sure that they're in a comparatively small pot because Hoyas don't flower well unless they're slightly pot bound.
Yeah.
And they're the main tricks with Hoyas.
And I've got quite a few in pots in Melbourne, and I give them loving neglect.
Good.
But my mother lived in an area of the southwest of WA which was not dissimilar to yours climatically. The temperatures would regularly go below 0 centigrade, and she had one outdoors undercover in a pot which loved it and flowered regularly every year, and it never succumbed, and it would get really, really cold there, like -2.
Oh, they can go down to those temperatures as long as they're not actually out in the frost.
Yes.
So they're surprisingly tough. Again, you've got to remember it's a fairly large genus, and there's some seriously tropical Hoyas which wouldn't actually respond well. The Hoya carnosa, which is the common one that we seem to grow in this country mainly, if I remember rightly, it comes from the foothills of the Himalayas or somewhere like that, where it actually does grow in a slightly colder climate.
Yes, and I've seen that growing through trees in botanic gardens in Australia. I've also got is it Carnosa compactum, which is the crinkly leafed one?
Yes, the one that looks like it had a holiday at Chernobyl.
I don't think we can say that. Anyway, mine is very happy.
Yes, with crinkly leaf or not,
Yes.
And of course, cactuses. There's a huge number of cactuses, and we really do think about the cactus sitting on the desk and just being completely ignored. So what's your advice on that one?
So the key thing to remember with cacti is that they're a desert succulent plant. So they store a lot of water. They don't need much watering, but they do need a lot of bright light. So whether they're indoors or outdoors, they need to be in a spot with plenty of natural light. A south-facing window indoors is ideal, and then the rest of the care kind of follows suit from there. Very minimal watering, very low maintenance. You want to let the soil completely dry out between waterings, and even leave it a bit longer.
You can find more of these indoor-outdoor plants over at the Horti-Culturalists channel, which I'll link to at the end of this video. And if you've had success with any plants, taking them indoors and outdoors, then do leave that in the comments below. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.